Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, allow me to inquire about your recent property acquisition. On June 15, 2025, you and your partner, Riley Roberts, bought a $4.2 million estate in Wesley Heights, one of the district's most affluent neighborhoods. You settled the transaction entirely in cash without a mortgage, paying the full $4.2 million up front. Deputy FBI Director Dan Bongino's voice resonated through the House Ethics Committee hearing room. He was not shouting or being theatrical, but rather stating facts with the calm demeanor of a veteran officer who knows he has cornered a suspect. He paused briefly to let that figure sink into the minds of everyone present. Your annual salary as a member of Congress is $174,000. You have served in this legislative body for 6 years. Even if you had saved every single penny, which is not the case, your total savings would amount to just over $1 million. Therefore, I am asking you a simple question. From where did the other $3 million originate? Absolute and heavy silence descended upon the room. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sat at the witness table, flanked by 3 expensive lawyers in tailored suits. The irony of the situation was lost on no one in the chamber. The Democratic Socialist Congresswoman, who had built her entire brand on fighting the wealthy elite, was now surrounded by attorneys whose hourly rates likely exceeded the daily earnings of her constituents. It was November 3, 2025, during a closed-door session of the House Ethics Committee. Deep in the basement of the Capitol, the proceedings were technically closed to the press, but were being recorded for the official archive. The room was packed to capacity with every committee member in attendance. Staff members lined the walls while stenographers captured every spoken word. Everyone present knew that a significant revelation was about to occur. AOC wore a burgundy blazer over a black top, accessorized with gold hoop earrings and her signature bold red lipstick. This was the carefully cultivated aesthetic of the working-class congresswoman from the Bronx, relatable and authentic. She had turned that look into a brand worth millions, featuring on magazine covers and viral social media moments. However, sitting across from Dan Bongino and his binders full of financial records, she did not look quite so confident anymore. There was visible tension in her jaw as her hands gripped the edge of the table. Her eyes kept darting toward her lawyers, seeking guidance that was not forthcoming. She had assumed this hearing was regarding the Met Gala dress controversy from the previous year. That incident involved the Tax the Rich dress she had worn, which had triggered conservatives so effectively. That was old news, easily defensible, and had already been explained extensively on Twitter. She had no idea she was about to be confronted with 14 months of FBI financial investigation showing she had become a multimillionaire by deceiving the working-class supporters she claimed to represent. Bongino sat calmly at the witness table, a former NYPD officer and Secret Service agent who had protected presidents and now served as deputy director of the FBI. He looked exactly like someone who had spent decades following money trails and building cases against criminals. Next to him sat Special Agent Jennifer Martinez from the Financial Crimes Unit, with her laptop open and ready to retrieve any necessary document. In front of Bongino were 2 thick binders bearing official FBI markings. He had spent the morning reviewing every page one final time, including bank records, wire transfer documentation, and LLC formation papers. The evidence also included tax returns, real estate deeds, and photographs of mansions and designer gowns. 14 months of investigation had been distilled into evidence that could not be spun away. AOC tried to answer his question about the mansion, but her voice came out defensive and almost rehearsed. She stated that her finances were private and claimed this was harassment of a woman of color who dared to challenge the establishment. Your finances became a matter of public interest, Bongino interrupted smoothly. When you bought a mansion you could not possibly afford on a government salary while claiming to represent working people, you made it public. Let me demonstrate exactly where the money came from. He pulled out bank statements and slid copies across the table to each committee member with a practiced motion. The sound of paper sliding across polished wood was the only noise in the room. There were 3 wire transfers, all completed within 1 week of your home purchase. He pointed to the highlighted transactions on the documents. On June 8th, $1.2 million was received from an LLC called Progressive Future Fund, registered in Delaware with no disclosed donors. On June 10th, $1.5 million came from the Grassroots Action Network, another Delaware LLC with no disclosed donors. On June 12th, a final $1.5 million arrived from the Democratic Advancement Coalition, which was also a Delaware LLC with no disclosed donors. He looked up from the documents to let his eyes meet hers. These are not grassroots donations from working people giving $15 because they believe in you. These are dark money vehicles and shell companies designed to hide the source of funding. We traced them, and although it took us months, we followed every single dollar. They all lead back to the same place. He paused, making her wait for the revelation. It is billionaire money from George Soros-linked progressive donor networks, funneled through these shell companies into your personal LLC to buy you a mansion. The room stirred with murmurs and people shifting in their seats. This situation was bigger than anyone had expected. Bongino was not finished, so he clicked a remote to display an image on the screen at the front of the room. A flowchart appeared, showing money movement through multiple organizations, with each connection traced by a colored line. "Let me walk you through this," he said, standing and moving toward the screen. "Start here at the top with Open Society Foundations, which is the main vehicle for George Soros. Money flows from there to the Democracy Alliance, the coordination network where billionaire progressive donors decide who to fund. From the Democracy Alliance, the money splits into these 3 Delaware LLCs I mentioned. From all 3 of those, within the same week in June, the money flows to your personal LLC. The amounts are $1.2 million, $1.5 million, and another $1.5 million, adding up to exactly $4.2 million. That is the exact price of your mansion." He turned back to face her. "You have built your entire political brand on fighting billionaires and attacking dark money in politics. You claim to represent the working class against the wealthy elite. But you have been bought by the billionaires you claim to oppose. You have taken their dark money, the exact same dark money you condemn every day on Twitter, to buy yourself a mansion in one of America's wealthiest neighborhoods." AOC started to protest, but Bongino raised his hand slightly. "That is just the mansion, and that is just where we are starting. Let me show you the rest of it. There is the boyfriend getting $1.6 million in campaign consulting fees for work nobody can identify. There are the $35,000 Met Gala tickets that violated gift rules. There is the $150,000 in designer clothes you wore and never reported. There is the book deal arranged by Soros-funded publishers. It is a luxury lifestyle funded by working-class supporters who actually believe you are one of them." He opened his first binder with a deliberate motion. The sound of the spine cracking seemed loud in the silent room. "Let me show this committee exactly how Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez turned democratic socialism into a personal enrichment scheme." AOC's lead attorney, Mark Elias, one of the Democratic Party's most expensive and connected lawyers, leaned forward to object. Chairman Michael Guest cut him off with a sharp look. "Mr. Elias, the deputy director will present his findings, and then your client will have an opportunity to respond." Bongino nodded at the chairman and then looked back at AOC. His voice became quieter and more personal. You entered Congress in 2019 with a net worth of about $7,000, some student loan debt, and experience working as a bartender. That was the story, the classic working-class narrative that got you elected. 6 years later, you are worth approximately $4.8 million. That is not a typo, as you have $4.8 million on a salary of $174,000 per year. He let that statement hang in the air for a moment. The math does not work. It is impossible unless you have been doing something other than serving your constituents. I am going to show you exactly what that something is. He settled back into his chair and opened the binder fully. Let us start with that mansion. With those words, he began laying out a case that would destroy everything Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had built. The carefully crafted image of the Democratic Socialist bartender from the Bronx was about to be revealed as the biggest fraud in modern progressive politics. To understand how we got here, and how the working-class hero ended up owning a $4 million mansion bought with billionaire money, you have to go back 12 hours earlier. This was when she walked into her office thinking this was just another Republican harassment session she could overcome with tweets. 12 hours earlier, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sat in her congressional office reviewing the subpoena that had arrived by courier the previous week. The document was frustratingly vague, simply labeled as a subpoena to testify before the House Committee on Ethics. The subject was listed as financial irregularities and potential violations of House rules. That was it, as there were no details or specifics, just a date, time, and location. There was also a warning that failure to appear would result in contempt charges. Her communications director, Saikat Chakrabarti, sat across from her scrolling through his tablet. He had been with her since the beginning, recruiting her to run through Justice Democrats back in 2017. He managed her shocking primary upset of Joe Crowley and helped build her into a national phenomenon. He looked up from his screen with a dismissive wave. They are fishing, and this is likely about the Met Gala dress from last year. Republicans are still mad about it, as the whole tax the rich slogan triggered them so badly they cannot let it go. They want to make it seem like some ethics violation. AOC nodded, her thumb scrolling through Twitter on her phone. The mentions were supportive as always, with her army of followers already defending her against a hearing that hadn't even happened yet. We already explained all that, specifically that Aurora loaned me the dress, and the ticket was work-related. The Met Gala raises money for arts education, and I disclosed everything that needed disclosing. This is just more of the same harassment, because I am effective. Her phone rang with Mark Elias joining the conversation. His voice came through the speaker carrying that expensive lawyer confidence that cost $1,500 an hour to access. The subpoena is intentionally vague, which tells me they are on a fishing expedition. It could be the Met Gala, or it could be some campaign finance reporting delays. We have had a few late filings, but nothing remotely criminal. It could be responding to frivolous FEC complaints from right-wing groups. So, how should I approach it? AOC asked. Elias had the answer ready, as he always did. Simple messaging is best. You are a working-class woman of color who threatens the establishment. Every attack on you is proof you are being effective. Republicans are terrified of you because you actually fight for people instead of corporations. This is political persecution disguised as oversight. Stay on that message, and you will be fine. Saikat pulled up polling data on his tablet, turning it to show her. Your approval in the district is 71%, and nationally among Democrats, you are 68% favorable. Your Twitter following just hit 13.2 million, making you more famous than most senators. This hearing is just going to make you more famous, and make Republicans look petty and obsessed. AOC felt her confidence return. She had survived everything thrown at her over 6 years. Trump had called her a communist nearly every week. Fox News had covered her like she was running for president. Right-wing media had manufactured countless scandals about her college expenses, where she really lived, her boyfriend's background, and her family history. They even tried to make a video of her dancing in college seem scandalous, but none of it stuck. Every attack made her more popular with her base, more famous nationally, and more powerful within the Democratic Party. She had mastered the playbook. When attacked, claim victim status. Call it racism or sexism depending on who the attacker was. Rally her massive online following. Get friendly media to defend her and turn it into a fundraising opportunity. Within 48 hours of any controversy, she would typically raise $500,000 from small donors eager to support her against the establishment. Why would this time be different? What AOC did not know, and could not have known, was that this was not a political attack. This was an FBI financial crimes investigation. For 14 months, Special Agent Jennifer Martinez and her team had been quietly following money trails. They were subpoenaing bank records from financial institutions and tracing wire transfers through multiple jurisdictions. They examined LLC formation documents filed in Delaware. They were building a case brick by brick, like prosecutors do when they know they only get one shot. And they had found something big. It was something that could not be explained away with a viral tweet thread. At that exact moment, 3,000 miles away at FBI headquarters in Quantico, Virginia, Dan Bongino was running through final preparations with his investigative team. The secure conference room walls were covered with printed flowcharts showing money movement between organizations. There were photographs of the mansion she had bought and screenshots of designer gowns at celebrity events. Bank statements with transactions highlighted in yellow and wire transfer confirmations were visible. It was a visual representation of systematic financial fraud spread across every available surface. Bongino was 51 years old and still built like someone who worked out as if he were protecting presidents, even though he spent most days behind a desk now. He had grown up in Queens, not far from where AOC claimed her Bronx roots, though he had actually lived there, unlike her carefully curated narrative. He had worked some of New York's toughest neighborhoods as an NYPD officer. He had protected President Bush during some of the most dangerous periods after 9/11. He knew what real public service looked like, and he knew a grifter when he saw one. Special Agent Jennifer Martinez stood at a whiteboard covered in timelines and financial calculations. She was 45 and had spent her entire adult life following money. First, she was at the SEC going after insider traders. Then, she spent 15 years at the FBI's white-collar crime division, taking down corrupt executives and politicians. This case was among the most brazen she had ever built. It involved a sitting member of Congress who had enriched herself by millions, while her public image was all about fighting for the poor. "Final walkthrough," Martinez said, clicking through slides on a secure monitor. "We have 14 months of financial investigation, which started when the Office of Congressional Ethics flagged unusual deposits to an LLC owned by AOC and her boyfriend Riley Roberts. We pulled the records, and what we found goes way beyond anything the OCE imagined." She brought up a chart showing net worth over time. The line was almost flat from 2019 to 2021, then shot upward at a sharp angle starting in 2022. When she entered Congress in January 2019, her financial disclosure showed a net worth of approximately $7,000. She disclosed student loan debt of $17,000 and a checking account balance under $2,000. This was typical for a 29-year-old bartender, which is what she was. Martinez clicked to the current figure. Today, based on assets we have identified and can document, her net worth is approximately $4.8 million. Bongino looked at the graph, noting the vertical climb was absurd. Her congressional salary is $174,000. Even if she saved every penny for 6 years, which is impossible, she would have maybe $1 million. Where did the other $3.8 million come from? Multiple sources, Martinez said, bringing up the next section of her presentation. Let me walk through each revenue stream we have identified and documented. She started with the boyfriend angle. Riley Roberts runs a company called Digital Outreach Strategies. Over the past 4 years, this company has received $1.6 million in payments from PACs closely aligned with AOC. Justice Democrats, the PAC that recruited her, is one of them. Courage to Change, her own leadership PAC, is another. Brand New Congress, closely aligned with Justice Democrats, is the third. Special Agent Tom Wilson spoke up from where he sat reviewing documents at the conference table. We examined the work product extensively and interviewed people at these PACs under oath. We asked them specifically what Riley delivered for $1.6 million. Do you know what we found? Nothing. There are no websites we can attribute to him. There are no email campaigns or social media strategies we can identify as his work. When we pressed the PAC officials, they got vague and said he consulted on digital strategy, but no documents exist, no reports, and no emails showing advice, just invoices and payments. Martinez nodded, calling it a classic corruption scheme. Hire your partner's company, pay them with donor money, and require no actual work. Money flows to the partner and becomes household income. The politician benefits personally while maintaining plausible deniability. She moved to the next section regarding the book deal and speaking fees. Her book came out in 2022, and she has made about $100,000 in royalties and advances. But here is where it gets interesting. The publisher's ownership structure appeared on the screen. The publisher is partially owned by an investment firm that receives funding from Soros-linked donors, and bulk purchases worth hundreds of thousands of dollars were made by the same PACs that employ her boyfriend. Courage to Change. PAC bought $180,000 worth of her books. Justice Democrats bought $120,000 worth. These are not real sales to actual readers. This is money laundering disguised as book purchases. Wilson added more context. We talked to bookstore owners and asked if they saw bulk orders from these organizations. They didn't, as the books went straight to storage in most cases. This was just a mechanism to funnel money to her through inflated royalty payments. Martinez clicked to the main event. Now for the big one, the dark money LLCs. We identified 3 Delaware LLCs that made transfers totaling $4.2 million to AOC's personal accounts in June 2025. They are the Progressive Future Fund, Grassroots Action Network, and Democratic Advancement Coalition. She brought up the money flow diagram. We spent months tracing these. All 3 connect back to the Democracy Alliance, a donor coordination network organized by George Soros, Tom Steyer, and other billionaire progressive donors. Here is how it works, she said, tracing it step by step on the screen. Billionaire donors contribute to the Democracy Alliance. The Democracy Alliance creates or funds these shell LLCs, dozens of them actually, for different candidates and causes. The LLCs make transfers that look like independent expenditures or grants, but they are really ways to move billionaire money to politicians while hiding the source. Bank records filled the screen showing June 2025. There were 3 wire transfers to Bronx Future Holdings, an LLC owned by AOC and Riley Roberts. $1.2 million on June 8th, $1.5 million on June 10th, and another $1.5 million on June 12th. 1 week later, Bronx Future Holdings purchases a mansion for $4.2 million cash. The timing is perfect because it is exactly what it looks like. Bongino studied the mansion photos, noting the brick facade, manicured grounds, and upscale neighborhood. She is being funded by the exact billionaires she claims to fight. Completely, Martinez confirmed. And it shows in her voting record. We analyzed every vote she has cast on issues important to Soros and the Democracy Alliance. Immigration policy shows 100% alignment with their positions. Criminal justice is 100%. Climate policy that benefits renewable energy companies Soros invests in is 100%. She is not an independent voice. She is a paid spokesperson, voting exactly as her funders want. Wilson pulled up another category of evidence. Then there are the unreported gifts, like the Met Gala ticket, dress, hair, and makeup. The ticket alone costs $35,000. The custom dress was valued at $12,000, and hair and makeup were another $3,000. The total gift value was $50,000. House rules are crystal clear that gifts over $390 must be declined or reimbursed. She did neither. He showed more photos, noting that is just one event. We documented her appearances at major events over 3 years. Versace gowns, Tory Burch custom pieces, Carolina Herrera, and Schiaparelli were all supposedly loaned to her for the exposure. The total value of designer clothing we can document is over 100 TTs, all unreported. Martinez added the final category regarding campaign fund conversion. She has been charging personal expenses to campaign accounts. This includes first-class flights to fashion shows and events that have nothing to do with her district. Luxury hotels in cities where she has no campaign activity and expensive dinners were also found. We estimate at least $200,000 in personal expenses were illegally charged to campaign funds over 4 years. Bongino leaned back, processing it all. So we have the boyfriend getting $1.6 million for phantom work. The book deal was rigged through the Soros network. There was $4.2 million in dark money for the mansion. She received $150,000 in designer gifts and misused $200,000 in campaign funds. And all of this happened while she tweets every day about fighting billionaires and banning dark money. The hypocrisy, Wilson said, pulling up her Twitter feed, is absolutely off the charts. He showed tweets side by side with evidence. One tweet from 2021 said, "No politician should take money from billionaires, period," with 340,000 likes. Next to it was a bank transfer showing $1.2 million from a Soros-funded LLC. Another tweet from 2022 said dark money is corrupting our democracy, and we must ban it, with 280,000 likes. Next to it were the 3 wire transfers totaling $4.2 million from dark money vehicles. A video clip of her speaking said, "I'll never forget where I came from. I'll always represent working people, not the elite." Next to it were photographs of the $4 million mansion in Wesley Heights, one of D.C.'s wealthiest neighborhoods. Bongino absorbed it all, then asked the key strategic question: how do we present this to maximize impact and minimize her ability to spin it? Martinez had thought this through carefully. We start with the mansion, as that is the thing she absolutely cannot explain. $4.2 million in cash on her salary is impossible, so make her try to explain where it came from. She cannot explain it. We have the bank records showing the wire transfers. We have the LLC documents. We have the deed. She is trapped before we even get to everything else. Then we show the dark money trail. We put up the flow chart showing money flowing from Soros through the Democracy Alliance, through the LLCs to her account. We destroy her grassroots progressive brand in one visual. Then the boyfriend scheme. We show $1.6 million in payments for work nobody can identify. Even her supporters will recognize that as corruption. Then the gifts and luxury lifestyle. We show her living like a celebrity with designer gowns, exclusive events, and luxury travel while claiming to be working class. Then we hit her with the tax returns. We subpoenaed them, and they show her reported income doesn't match her assets and lifestyle. That implies unreported income and potential tax evasion. Finally, we show her voting record alongside the Soros funding. We prove she is bought. She votes exactly as her billionaire funders want on every single issue. Bongino thought about the defenses she would deploy. She is going to scream that this is sexist, racist, and the establishment attacking a woman of color who fights for change. That is her entire playbook. Let her, Martinez said firmly. We have bank records, wire transfers, LLC documents, deed records, and tax returns. This isn't opinion or bias. This is math. And math doesn't care about identity politics. Wilson added that the media will try to protect her initially because she is their progressive hero. But we are releasing everything publicly. When people see the mansion, see the Soros money, and see the boyfriend getting paid millions for nothing, even MSNBC is going to have trouble defending it. Bongino stood up and started gathering his materials. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez spent 6 years building a brand as the authentic voice of working people. The democratic socialist who fights billionaires and the bartender who took on the machine were lies. Every bit of it was a lie. She saw an opportunity because progressive politics is trendy and young people eat it up, and she used it to get rich, not to help her constituents, but to enrich herself. He picked up the binder containing the mansion photos. He looked at the beautiful brick estate that cost more than most of her constituents would make in their entire lives combined. $4.2 million is what her democratic socialism bought her. Let's go show Congress what their progressive star has really been doing. At 1:30 that afternoon, AOC's motorcade pulled up to the Capitol. She had made sure friendly photographers knew what time she would arrive. The optics of walking into another Republican witch hunt were important to her brand. She stepped out of the black SUV looking camera-ready. She wore a burgundy blazer and gold hoops, looking like the people's champion heading into battle against the establishment. She walked through the Capitol with her legal team and chief of staff. They went down to the basement level where committee hearing rooms were located. As she approached, she noticed more security presence than usual. More staff were hovering around, and the energy felt different somehow. At 1:55, she entered the hearing room. The atmosphere immediately felt wrong. The committee members looked too serious. Even the Democrats weren't giving her supportive smiles or whispered words of encouragement like they usually did. And at the witness table she saw him, Dan Bongino, the deputy director of the FBI himself. He was not some junior agent, but the number 2 person in the entire bureau. There was another agent beside him, and those binders were multiple thick binders with official markings. Something cold settled in her stomach. This was not about a dress. This was something else entirely. At exactly 2 o'clock, Chairman Michael Guest gavelled the hearing to order. His voice was formal and serious. This hearing is called to order. We are conducting a closed-door session of the House Ethics Committee to examine potential violations of House rules, federal campaign finance law, gift regulations, and tax law by Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York's 14th Congressional District. He paused and looked directly at her. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has been conducting a financial investigation for 14 months. Deputy Director Bongino has requested to brief this committee on the findings. This is an extremely serious matter. Deputy Director, you may proceed. Bongino stood and looked at AOC with the steady, unwavering gaze of someone who had interviewed countless suspects. He knew when they were guilty before the first question was even asked. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, he began, his voice calm and measured. You have built your political career on a very specific narrative. You are a working-class woman from the Bronx who fights for working people against billionaires and the corrupt establishment. You have called for taxing the rich. You have called for banning dark money in politics. You have called for ending the influence of wealthy donors. You have presented yourself as authentic, as someone who truly represents ordinary Americans because you came from that world. He paused to let that sink in. I am here to show this committee that every bit of that is a lie, that you have enriched yourself massively while in Congress, that you are funded by the exact billionaires you claim to oppose, that you violated campaign finance laws, gift rules, and tax laws, that you are living a life of luxury by grifting the working-class people who believe you actually represent them. He opened his first binder. Let's start with your mansion. AOC's confident expression faltered just for a second, but everyone in that room saw it, and they knew this was going to be devastating. Bongino pulled out a folder and opened it deliberately. Inside were real estate documents and photographs. He slid the first photo across to the committee members. On June 15th of this year, less than 5 months ago, you purchased a property located at 3847 Woodley Road Northwest in the Wesley Heights neighborhood of Washington, D.C. Let me show everyone what you bought. He clicked his remote. The screen at the front of the room lit up with a photograph of a stunning brick mansion. It had beautiful architecture, mature trees, and a manicured lawn. It was the kind of house that screamed serious money. That is the front, Bongino said, noting the 5,800 square feet, 6 bedrooms, and 5.5 bathrooms. He clicked through more photos. The gourmet kitchen had marble countertops and commercial-grade stainless steel appliances. A wine cellar offered climate-controlled storage for 500 bottles. A home theater featured stadium seating that looked like it belonged in a commercial cinema. An infinity pool overlooked professionally landscaped grounds. A 3-car garage was bigger than most apartments in her district. This home, Bongino continued, is located in Wesley Heights. For those unfamiliar with D.C. neighborhoods, Wesley Heights is one of the most exclusive areas in the city. The median home price there is $3.1 million. Your neighbors include Fortune 500 CEOs, senior partners at major law firms, and lobbyists who make more in a year than most Americans will see in a lifetime. This is not a working-class neighborhood, Congresswoman. This is where the wealthy elite live. He let that contrast hang in the air for a moment. Then he pulled out the purchase documents. The property was purchased by an LLC called Bronx Future Holdings. Interesting name, Bronx Future, for someone buying a mansion in one of D.C.'s richest neighborhoods. The LLC is registered in Delaware, not New York. You and Riley Roberts are listed as the managing members. He looked up at her. The purchase price was $4,200,000, and here is what is remarkable. You paid cash. No mortgage, no financing, and no monthly payments were involved. $4.2 million in cash just appeared and bought you this house. Bongino flipped to another page. Now, your congressional salary is $174,000 per year. You have been in Congress since January 2019. That is 6 years and 10 months. Your total congressional salary over that entire time is approximately $1,060,000. He did the math out loud slowly. Even if you somehow managed to save every single penny of your salary, paying no federal taxes, no state taxes, and no rent, you would still come up short. If you bought no food, made no student loan payments, and had zero living expenses of any kind, you would have $1.16 million. You bought a house for $4.2 million. That leaves $3 and $4 million completely unaccounted for. He closed the folder and looked directly at her. So I am asking you a simple question. Where did that $3 million come from? Silence followed. AOC looked at her lawyers. Mark Elias leaned over and whispered something. She nodded slightly, but did not speak. Bongino waited, letting the silence stretch out for 10 seconds, then 15, then 20. Finally, he spoke again. Let me show you exactly where it came from. He pulled out bank statements and passed copies to each committee member. These are the bank records for Bronx Future Holdings, LLC. The account was opened on May 30th of this year. It was a brand new entity. For the first 2 weeks, the account balance was zero. Then, in the span of less than 1 week, the account received 3 large wire transfers. He pointed to the highlighted transactions. June 8th showed a wire transfer of $200,000. The sender is listed as Progressive Future Fund, LLC. The memo line says Grant Disbursement. June 10th showed a wire transfer of $1,500,000. The sender is Grassroots Action Network, LLC. And the memo line says Political Support. June 12th showed a wire transfer of $1,500,000. The sender is Democratic Advancement Coalition, LLC. And the memo line says Movement Building. He looked at the committee. 3 transfers in 5 days totaled $400,000. The exact amount needed to purchase the mansion was assembled. And 3 days after that final transfer, the LLC closed on the house, paid cash, and the transaction was complete. Representative Virginia Fox, the Republican from North Carolina, raised her hand. Deputy Director, what are these LLCs, and who is behind them? Bongino nodded. That is the critical question, Congresswoman Fox, and that is where this gets really interesting. He clicked his remote, and a complex flowchart appeared on the screen. Lines connected various organizations in a web of financial relationships. All 3 of these LLCs are registered in Delaware. Delaware is well known as a haven for shell companies because it allows minimal disclosure requirements. These 3 LLCs have no public donor lists, no websites, and no physical offices. They exist purely as vehicles to move money around while obscuring where it is really coming from. He used a laser pointer to trace the connections on the chart. We spent months tracking these organizations down. We subpoenaed banking records from multiple institutions. We followed the money back through several layers. Here is what we found. He pointed to the top of the chart. Progressive Future Fund received its funding from an organization called Democracy Alliance. Grassroots Action Network also received its funding from Democracy Alliance. Democratic Advancement Coalition came from the same source. All 3 shell LLCs were funded by Democracy Alliance. And what is Democracy Alliance? Fox asked. Bongino had the answer ready. It is a donor coordination network for billionaire progressive donors. It was founded and primarily funded by George Soros through his Open Society foundations. Other major donors include Tom Steyer, members of the Pritzker family, and various Silicon Valley billionaires. Democracy Alliance essentially coordinates giving among wealthy, progressive donors to maximize their political impact. He showed financial documents on screen. In 2024 and 2025, Democracy Alliance received over $600 million from these billionaire donors. They then distributed that money to various organizations, PACs, and as we see here, shell LLCs. These entities make payments to politicians while hiding the original source. Representative Jamie Raskin, the Democrat from Maryland, looked troubled. He had been generally sympathetic to AOC in the past. Deputy Director, are you saying that Representative Ocasio-Cortez received nearly $5 million from George Soros? From Soros-linked organizations, yes, sir, approximately $5 million that we have been able to document so far. There may be additional amounts we haven't uncovered yet. The room erupted in murmurs with committee members whispering to each other. Staff were scribbling notes. AOC sat frozen, her face pale. Bongino continued. The money that bought Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez's mansion came from George Soros and other billionaires. It was laundered through Democracy Alliance and 3 shell LLCs to hide the source. It went to her personal LLC, not to her campaign or any political organization, and it was used to buy her a $4 million house in one of America's wealthiest neighborhoods. He paused to let that sink in fully. She is being funded by the exact billionaires she claims to fight against. Bongino moved to his next section without missing a beat. Now I want to talk about Riley Roberts, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez's longtime partner. He operates a company called Digital Outreach Strategies. Congresswoman, can you tell us what this company does? AOC looked at Mark Elias, who leaned forward. My client is not required to have detailed knowledge of her partner's business operations. Fair enough, Bongino said smoothly. Let me tell you what we found. He pulled out corporate documents. Digital Outreach Strategies was incorporated in New York in January 2021. That represents 1 month after Representative Ocasio-Cortez won her second term. According to the corporate filing, the company provides digital marketing and outreach consulting services to political organizations. He looked at the documents for a moment, then back up. We examined this company's operations very thoroughly. We pulled every public record and interviewed clients and associates. Here is what we discovered. He ticked items off on his fingers as he spoke. Digital Outreach Strategies has no website, which is kind of ironic for a digital outreach company. There is no LinkedIn company page. There is no social media presence whatsoever. There is no office space beyond Riley Roberts' home address. There are no employees other than Roberts himself. And here is the interesting part. There is only one category of clients. He pulled out payment records. The only organizations that have ever paid Digital Outreach Strategies are political action committees closely aligned with Representative Ocasio-Cortez. Let me walk you through them. Justice Democrats is the PAC that recruited AOC to run in 2018. They identified her, trained her, and funded her primary campaign against Joe Crowley. Courage to Change is Representative Ocasio-Cortez's own leadership PAC that she founded and controls. Brand New Congress is closely aligned with Justice Democrats and actively supported her campaigns. He showed the payment records. Over the past 4 years, Riley Roberts' company has received significant payments from these 3 PACs. In 2021, Justice Democrats paid him $180,000. Brand New Congress paid another $120,000. The following year, the amounts increased. Justice Democrats paid $240,000. Courage to Change paid $180,000. In 2023, Courage to Change paid $310,000, and Justice Democrats added another $190,000. Then last year, in 2024, Courage to Change paid $380,000, and Justice Democrats contributed $200,000 more. He paused and did the math out loud. Total over 4 years is 1,000. He let that number hang there. $1.6 million paid to the boyfriend of a sitting member of Congress by PACs she is intimately connected to. So naturally, we asked what he did to earn that money. Special Agent Martinez spoke up from her seat. We interviewed officials from all 3 PACs under oath. We asked them specifically to describe what Riley Roberts delivered for $1.6 million. She pulled out deposition transcripts. Timothy O'Malley, Executive Director of Justice Democrats, was asked what digital outreach strategies produced. He said we hired them for strategic consulting on digital campaigns. I don't recall specific deliverables, but I believe Riley provided general advice on social media strategy. We then asked him to produce any documents, emails, reports, or work product from Roberts. He said they don't have formal reports and that it was more informal consultation. She flipped to another transcript. Sophia Chen, Director of Courage to Change PAC, was asked what digital outreach delivered for $380,000 in 2024 alone. She said Riley Roberts provided valuable insights into our digital presence. We asked what specific insights. She said strategic thinking about online engagement, as it's hard to quantify exactly. Martinez looked up. We interviewed 6 different people across these 3 PACs. Not a single one could identify specific work product. Not one could show us a website Roberts built, an email campaign he designed, or a social media strategy document he wrote. There was not a single concrete deliverable, just vague language about consulting and strategic advice. Bongino added more context. We also looked into Riley Roberts' background and qualifications. He has a bachelor's degree in finance from Boston University, which is a fine school and a good degree. Before Representative Ocasio-Cortez ran for Congress, he worked in marketing for a small tech startup called Homebinder. His salary there was approximately $65,000 a year. He has no professional background in political campaigning. He has no experience running digital outreach programs. He has no portfolio of successful campaigns we can identify. He pulled up Roberts' sparse resume. Yet somehow, right after his girlfriend becomes a member of Congress, he is suddenly worth $100,000 a year as a digital consultant. This happened despite having no experience in the field. It happened despite producing no identifiable work product. It happened despite having no other clients. The only logical explanation is that he is being paid because of who he is sleeping with. Representative James Comer spoke up. Deputy Director, this sounds like a classic pay-to-play scheme. That is exactly what it is, Congressman. Politicians can't directly take money from PACs for personal use, as that is illegal and obvious. But they can hire their spouse or partner's company and pay that company inflated rates for minimal or non-existent work. The money goes to the partner's business account and then becomes household income. The politician personally benefits from campaign funds while maintaining plausible deniability. Martinez added one more detail. We also reviewed Riley Roberts' tax returns. He has reported all this income, so we are not alleging tax evasion on his part. But here is what is interesting. His business expenses are minimal. He is reporting profit margins over 90%. That means he is pocketing almost all the money with virtually no costs. Why? Because he is not actually running a business. He is not hiring staff, renting office space, buying equipment, or paying for services. He is just receiving payments and keeping the money. Bongino shifted to the bigger picture. Let me show you the full scope of how Representative Ocasio-Cortez is actually funded. This isn't a grassroots movement of small dollar donors like she claims. This is billionaire money being laundered through a sophisticated network of organizations. The screen lit up with a massive flowchart. At the top, several boxes represented billionaire donors. Lines flowed downward through various intermediary organizations, eventually reaching a box at the bottom labeled with AOC's name. "Start at the top," Bongino said, using his laser pointer. George Soros, through Open Society Foundations, contributes about $250 million annually to progressive causes. Tom Steyer, through Next Gen America, adds another $75 million. The Pritzker family, through their various foundations, contribute about $40 million. Silicon Valley billionaires, through tech industry PACs, add roughly $180 million more. All told, we are talking about $500 million a year from wealthy donors. He traced the money flow downward. These donors don't just randomly give to causes. They coordinate through the Democracy Alliance, which strategically decides which progressive candidates and causes to fund. In 2024, we obtained internal Democracy Alliance documents that specifically identified Representative Ocasio-Cortez as a top-tier priority. Their assessment described her as a highly effective spokesperson for progressive policies with massive social media reach. The laser pointer moved to the next layer. Democracy Alliance then funds or creates multiple organizations and shell LLCs. Progressive Future Fund, Grassroots Action Network, and Democratic Advancement Coalition are among them. The Sunrise Movement, Make the Road Action, and Working Families Party are also included. We've identified approximately 25 other entities. He showed how the connections branched out. These organizations all support Representative Ocasio-Cortez in various ways. Some make independent expenditures supporting her campaigns. Some hire her boyfriend's company for phantom consulting work. Some make grants to her personal LLCs. Some purchase bulk quantities of her book. It is a comprehensive funding ecosystem designed to enrich her while maintaining the appearance of grassroots support. Bongino pulled up a summary page. We estimate that Soros-linked organizations have spent approximately $8.2 million supporting Representative Ocasio-Cortez over the past 6 years. That breaks down as follows. He read through the categories. $3.1 million was spent in independent expenditures for her campaigns. $4.2 million was sent in transfers to her personal LLCs, which is the mansion money. $1.6 million went to her boyfriend's phantom consulting company. $800,000 was spent in book bulk purchases that inflated her royalties. And approximately $500,000 went to other support like event sponsorships, media promotion, and paid social media boosting. $8.2 million from the billionaire class she claims to oppose. He paused, then asked the obvious question. Why would billionaires give $8 million to a socialist who says she wants to destroy them? He clicked to the next slide, showing a voting record analysis. Because she votes exactly how they want her to. We analyzed every single vote Representative Ocasio-Cortez has cast on issues important to George Soros and the Democracy Alliance donor network. He went through the categories. On immigration policy, she has voted for open borders policies 100% of the time, with no exceptions. This is exactly what Soros advocates and funds through multiple immigration advocacy organizations. On law enforcement, she has a 100% voting record for defunding police, ending qualified immunity, and reducing incarceration. This is exactly the agenda Soros has spent $40 million promoting through district attorney races across the country. On energy policy, she shows 100% support for Green New Deal provisions and renewable energy mandates. These policies directly benefit companies that Soros has major investments in. On foreign policy, she opposes Israel, supports the Iran nuclear deal, and criticizes U.S. allies. These positions align perfectly with Soros's stated foreign policy preferences. On criminal justice, she supports bail reform, decriminalization, reduced sentences, and ending cash bail. That is the exact Soros agenda being implemented in cities where his funded prosecutors have taken office. Bongino looked directly at AOC. You are not an independent progressive voice fighting against billionaires. You are a paid spokesperson for George Soros's political agenda. He gives you millions of dollars, and you vote exactly as he wants on every single issue. That is the textbook definition of political corruption. AOC couldn't stay quiet anymore. She stood up, her voice rising. This is outrageous, as I vote for progressive policies because I believe in them. Then why do you take their money? Bongino cut her off, his voice sharp. You have spent your entire career attacking billionaires and dark money, but you have taken $8.2 million from exactly that source. You have tweeted about it. He pulled up her Twitter feed on the screen. One specific tweet was enlarged. Here it is from April 2021. You wrote, "No politician should take money from billionaires. It compromises their integrity." That tweet got 340,000 likes from people who believed you meant it. 2 months after you posted that tweet, you received $500,000 from a Soros-funded LLC. The hypocrisy is absolutely staggering. Bongino moved to his next section. Let's talk about the incident that first drew public attention. The 2024 Met Gala. You attended wearing a custom white dress with "Tax the Rich" written across the back in large red letters. Do you remember that? Of course I remember, AOC said. It was a powerful political statement about wealth inequality. It was a $12,000 custom dress, Bongino interrupted, worn to an event where tickets cost $35 each. Let me show you the actual numbers. Financial documents appeared on screen. The dress was custom-made by designer Aurora James of Brother Vellies. According to our investigation, which included interviews with people in the fashion industry familiar with custom work, the cost was approximately $12,000. The Met Gala ticket price is publicly known as $35,000 per seat. You also had professional hair and makeup done for the event, which cost $3,000. Total value of what you received that night was $50,000. He pulled out the House Ethics Manual. House rules are explicit and unambiguous. Members may not accept gifts worth more than $309 in any calendar year from any single source. Gifts exceeding that amount must either be declined or the value must be reimbursed to the donor within a specified time period. You claimed the dress was loaned and that the ticket was work-related because the Met Gala benefits arts education. Is that still your position? Mark Elias jumped in. The event was legitimately work-related. Representative Ocasio-Cortez was representing her constituents and advocating for progressive tax policy through the message on the dress. At a celebrity fashion gala, Bongino said flatly, where celebrities and billionaires pay $35,000 to attend a party. That is congressional work? Attending a fashion industry fundraiser for an art museum? He pulled out the relevant section of the ethics rules and read from it. The House Ethics Manual is clear. Events must have a direct connection to official duties. Social events that are primarily entertainment in nature do not qualify as official duties, even if they involve notable persons or causes. Attending a fashion industry gala is not an official duty. This was a personal social event. The ticket was a gift, and the dress was a gift. The total value was $50,000, which is a massive ethics violation. Bongino clicked to his next exhibit. But here is where it gets even more interesting. After you wore Aurora James's dress and gave her company massive free publicity, the images went viral. They were shared millions of times and generated enormous brand awareness. Her sales increased dramatically. And we found something very curious. Purchase orders filled the screen. In the 6 months following the Met Gala, Soros-funded organizations made bulk purchases of Brother Veli's products, totaling $280,000. Courage to Change PAC, your PAC, purchased $95,000 worth of what they described as promotional items and gifts. Justice Democrats bought $78,000 worth of supporter thank-you gifts. Progressive Future Fund purchased $107,000 in what they called movement merchandise. All of them bought Aurora James's products right after she gave you a $50,000 gift. He looked at the committee. This is a money laundering scheme. Aurora James gives Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez $50,000 worth of dress and ticket. The photos go viral, and James gets massive publicity. Then organizations that fund AOC turn around and buy $280,000 worth of James's products. James profits, and AOC gets her free designer goods. The organizations look like they are buying promotional items. Everyone wins, except the taxpayers and the working-class donors who think their money is going to progressive causes instead of subsidizing celebrity lifestyles. He wasn't done, so he pulled out another thick folder. And the Met Gala isn't an isolated incident. We documented Representative Ocasio-Cortez's appearances at major celebrity events over the past 3 years. Let me show you. Photos began cycling on the screen. Each one showed AOC in an expensive designer gown at a high-profile event. At the 2024 Oscars Vanity Fair after-party, she is wearing a custom Versace gown. We consulted with fashion industry experts who estimated the value at $8,000. It was supposedly loaned for the exposure. At the 2024 CFDA Fashion Awards, she wore a custom Tory Burch ensemble. Estimated value was $6,500, also loaned. At the 2025 Met Gala, she attended again in a custom Schiaparelli dress. Estimated value was $15,000, loaned. At the 2025 Time 100 Gala, she wore a custom Carolina Herrera gown. Estimated value was $7,000, loaned. The photos kept coming, event after event, designer gown after designer gown. We have documented multiple other red carpet events and high-profile appearances. The total estimated value of designer clothing she has worn over 3 years is $152,000. He let that number sink in. That is more than the average American household makes in 3 years, but in designer clothes. All supposedly loaned for exposure. But house rules don't have an exception for loans or for exposure. If you receive something of value, whether it is given as a gift, loaned to you, or provided in exchange for publicity, it must be reported. And the value must be reimbursed if it exceeds the $390 threshold. Representative Ocasio-Cortez has reported none of these. 0. That is $152,000 in unreported gifts. Each one is a separate ethics violation. Representative Susan Wild, the ranking Democrat, looked genuinely pained. Deputy Director, is it possible that Representative Ocasio-Cortez simply didn't understand the reporting requirements? Bongino shook his head. She understood, Congresswoman Wild. Every member takes mandatory ethics training when they enter Congress. The rules about gifts are covered extensively. They are clear and straightforward. She chose not to follow them because she wanted to live like a celebrity and attend exclusive events without the ethics disclosure that would expose the lifestyle she is actually living. Bongino moved to his final evidentiary section. We subpoenaed Representative Ocasio-Cortez's tax returns for the years 2019 through 2024. They tell a very interesting story. Tax documents appeared on screen with sensitive personal information redacted, but the key financial figures clearly visible. In 2019, her first year in Congress, she reported an adjusted gross income of $174,000. That is just her congressional salary. Her tax return showed total savings at the end of the year of $4,000. In 2020, adjusted gross income was $181,000, consisting of salary plus some small speaking fees. Year-end savings were reported as $8,000. In 2021, adjusted gross income jumped to $298,000 from salary plus her book advance. Year-end savings were $35,000. In 2022, adjusted gross income was $412,000 from salary plus book royalties and more speaking fees. Year-end savings were $127,000. In 2023, adjusted gross income was $389,000 from salary continuing royalties and speaking fees. Year-end savings were $98,000. In 2024, adjusted gross income was $634,000 due to salary, higher royalties, and increased speaking fees. Year-end savings were $284,000. Bongino did the math out loud slowly and clearly. Total reported income over 6 years was $2,088,000 after federal taxes and state taxes. And remember, she is in a high tax bracket. That leaves approximately $1.3 million net income. If she was extremely frugal and managed to save 50% of her net income, which would be extraordinarily difficult in expensive areas like New York City and Washington, D.C., she would have approximately $650,000 in savings. He looked up at the committee. But she owns a $4.2 million mansion. She has spent an estimated $150,000 on luxury goods over 3 years. She has traveled extensively with first-class flights and luxury hotels. She lives in an expensive apartment in D.C. The numbers simply do not add up. The lifestyle exceeds the income by a massive margin. He closed the tax folder. There are only 2 possible explanations for this discrepancy. 1, she has significant unreported income that should have been taxed, but wasn't. That would be tax evasion, a federal crime. 2, the money for the mansion and luxury lifestyle came from sources that were disguised as something else, like payments to her boyfriend's fake consulting company or grants to her personal LLC. That should have been reported as income but wasn't. That would be money laundering, also a federal crime. Either way, she has violated federal law. For his final presentation, Bongino compiled AOC's own words against her documented actions. I want to end by showing the committee the disconnect between what Representative Ocasio-Cortez says publicly and what she actually does privately. The screen split in half. On the left side were her tweets and video statements. On the right side was evidence of her actions. The first pairing appeared. On the left was a tweet from 2021 saying no politician should take money from billionaires, period. The tweet showed 340,000 likes. On the right was a bank transfer document showing $1.2 million from a Soros-funded LLC deposited to her account. Next pairing showed a tweet from 2022 saying dark money is corrupting our democracy and we must ban it. That had 280,000 likes. On the right were the 3 wire transfers from Delaware dark money LLCs totaling $4.2 million. Next on the left was a tweet from 2023 saying, Tax the rich, as they don't need multiple homes while working, people can't afford rent. It had 520,000 likes. On the right was a photo of her $4.2 million mansion in Wesley Heights. Next on the left was a video clip of her speaking at a rally saying, "I'll never forget where I came from, and I'll always fight for working people, not the wealthy elite." On the right was a photo of her at the Met Gala in the $12,000 dress at a $35,000 per ticket event. Next on the left was a tweet saying, "Billionaires shouldn't exist, as no one needs that much wealth." On the right was a calculation showing her net worth increase from $7,000 to $4.8 million in 6 years. Bongino let the images speak for themselves for a long moment. The room was completely silent. Even the stenographer had stopped typing, just watching the screen. Finally, Bongino spoke, his voice quiet but carrying. Representative Ocasio-Cortez has built her entire brand on authenticity, on being a working-class woman who genuinely understands struggle and fights for working people against wealthy elites who don't care about them. Every single bit of that is a lie. He clicked off the screen. She has enriched herself massively using her position. She lives in luxury. She is funded by billionaires. She is exactly what she claims to oppose. He closed all his binders and stacked them neatly. That is not just hypocrisy, that is fraud. She has defrauded the supporters who give her money thinking she is one of them. She has defrauded the voters who think she represents their interests. And she has violated multiple federal laws doing it. He looked at Chairman Guest. That concludes my presentation. The hearing room was utterly silent. 4 hours of evidence had been presented. Bank records showing wire transfers from Soros-linked organizations were displayed. Photos of a mansion she couldn't possibly afford were shown. Payment records showing her boyfriend received $1.6 million for phantom work were revealed. Designer clothes worth more than most people's annual salary were documented. Tax returns that didn't match her assets were examined. Her own tweets condemning the exact behavior she was engaging in were played. It was overwhelming, undeniable, and devastating. Chairman Guest looked at AOC. His voice was measured but firm. "Congresswoman, you have heard the Deputy Director's presentation. You have an opportunity to respond to these allegations. What do you have to say?" AOC sat frozen for a long moment. Her 3 lawyers were whispering urgently among themselves, huddled close. Finally, she spoke. Her voice lacked the usual confident edge and came out defensive and shaky. This is a politically motivated attack on a woman of color who threatens the establishment. The FBI is being weaponized to target progressive voices who actually fight for change instead of maintaining the status quo. Chairman Guest cut her off, his patience clearly exhausted. "Congresswoman, we just spent 4 hours looking at bank records showing you received $4.2 million from billionaire-funded organizations to buy a mansion. That is not political. That is financial evidence and documentation. How do you explain it?" AOC's voice rose, getting more emotional. Those were legitimate contributions to support progressive movement building and organizing. "They went to your personal LLC," Bongino said calmly from his seat. "Not to your campaign and not to a political organization. They went to Bronx Future Holdings, which you personally own and control. Then that LLC bought you a house. Explain to this committee how buying yourself a $4 million mansion constitutes movement building." Silence followed, with no answer. Representative Raskin tried to give her an opening, his voice sympathetic. "Congresswoman, is it possible these contributions were intended for a charitable foundation or advocacy organization you were planning to establish?" AOC grabbed at the lifeline. "Yes, exactly. We were discussing creating a progressive education entity to support grassroots organizing. Bongino pulled out LLC formation documents. Bronx Future Holdings was created on May 30th, 2025. It received $4.2 million in June. It bought a house on June 15th. That is its only transaction in its entire existence. It is not a foundation. It is not supporting any causes. It owns your mansion. That is all it does. That is its sole purpose, to hold title to your personal residence. AOC looked trapped, and her voice got sharper and more desperate. I don't have to justify my personal finances to a committee that is clearly engaged in political persecution. Yes, you do, Chairman Guest said firmly, cutting through her protest. You are a member of Congress. You are subject to House ethics rules, financial disclosure laws, gift regulations, and campaign finance laws like every other member. And the evidence suggests you have violated all of them extensively. You need to answer the deputy director's questions. Mark Elias finally spoke up. His expensive lawyer voice filled the room. Chairman, my client has cooperated with this hearing for 4 hours, but we are now approaching issues that could implicate her Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination. The room erupted with multiple people speaking at once. The implications of taking the Fifth were devastating, and everyone knew it. Bongino held up his hand, waiting for quiet. When the room settled, he spoke. Let me ask specific yes or no questions. Congresswoman, did you receive $4.2 million from organizations funded by George Soros? Elias responded immediately. My client declines to answer on advice of counsel. Did you use that money to purchase a personal mansion for yourself? Declines to answer. Did your boyfriend Riley Roberts receive $1.6 million from PACs you are associated with for work he didn't actually perform? Declines to answer. Did you accept approximately $50,000 in gifts for the Met Gala without reporting them as required by House rules? Declines to answer. Did you fail to report $152,000 in designer clothing gifts over 3 years? Declines to answer. Bongino sat back and looked at the committee members. She is declining to answer because answering truthfully would incriminate her. Because the evidence is overwhelming, and she can't explain it without admitting to criminal conduct. AOC's composure finally shattered completely. Tears welled up in her eyes, and her voice shook with emotion. You are destroying me because I fight for people, because I challenge power, because I am a woman of color who dares to stand up to the establishment. This is what they always do to women who... Representative Comer interrupted, his voice quiet but cutting through her emotion. Congresswoman, we are not attacking you because you are a woman. We are investigating you because you bought a $4 million mansion you mathematically cannot afford on a congressional salary. And the FBI traced the money back to George Soros. That is not sexism. That is a financial crimes investigation following evidence of corruption. The fight seemed to drain out of her. She slumped in her chair, mascara starting to run. The carefully maintained image was crumbling in real time. Chairman Guest looked grim. He had clearly hoped this wouldn't be as bad as the FBI briefing had suggested. But the evidence was even more damning when presented in full. Based on the evidence presented today, this committee will now vote on the following measures. He read from a prepared statement. 1. Immediate referral to the Department of Justice for investigation and potential prosecution of campaign finance violations, gift rule violations, tax evasion, wire fraud, and conspiracy. 2. Immediate referral to the Internal Revenue Service for investigation of unreported income and potential tax evasion. 3. Immediate removal of Representative Ocasio-Cortez from all committee assignments pending the outcome of these investigations. 4. Recommendation that the full House of Representatives consider expulsion proceedings. 5. Referral to the Federal Election Commission for violations of campaign finance law. He looked directly at AOC, his voice almost sad. Congresswoman, you are hereby suspended from all committee duties, effective immediately. You are strongly advised to retain experienced criminal defense counsel. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel came down. The sound echoed in the silent room as committee members filed out. Some looked shell-shocked, others grim. AOC sat at the witness table completely still. Her lawyers packed up their materials in silence, already mentally calculating their fees for the criminal trial that was coming. Her chief of staff stood off to the side, his phone already buzzing with press inquiries. Within an hour, the leaks started. AOC is under FBI investigation for financial crimes. Mansion purchase traced to Soros money. Boyfriend received $1.6 million in no-show consulting. Progressive Congresswoman takes Fifth Amendment on financial questions. By evening, it was the only story in political media. The photos spread everywhere. The $4.2 million mansion with its pool and wine cellar was shown side by side with the photo of her at the Met Gala in the Tax the Rich dress. The contrast was absolutely devastating. You couldn't look at those two images together and not see the hypocrisy. Even progressive media outlets that had championed her for years struggled to defend it. The evidence was too strong, the hypocrisy too blatant, and the amounts too large to explain away. The Democratic Socialist bartender from the Bronx had become a multi-millionaire living in a mansion in one of America's wealthiest neighborhoods. And she had done it by taking millions from the billionaires she claimed to fight. While her working-class supporters sent her $15 donations, thinking she was one of them. Everyone could see it now. The whole beautiful lie was exposed in bank records and photographs. The wheels of justice moved quickly once they started turning. Within 48 hours of the hearing, the FBI formally referred the case to the Department of Justice. Within a week, a federal grand jury was impaneled in Washington, D.C. The evidence was so strong that prosecutors moved with unusual speed. The indictment came down in January 2026, United States versus Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Riley Roberts. Against AOC, there were 8 criminal counts. Illegal conversion of campaign funds was 3 counts. Wire fraud was 2 counts. Tax evasion was 2 counts. Violating House gift rules was 1 count. Against Roberts, there were 4 criminal counts. Conspiracy to commit wire fraud was 2 counts. Filing false business records was 2 counts. The trial began in April 2026 in Federal District Court in Washington. Much of the evidence from the Ethics Committee hearing became public. The photos of the mansion were shown. The wire transfers from Soros-linked shell companies were revealed. The boyfriend's company that produced no actual work was exposed. The designer clothes worth more than middle-class annual salaries were displayed. The tax returns that mathematically didn't support the lifestyle were analyzed. Her own tweets condemning the exact behavior she was engaging in were read. AOC's defense team tried everything. They argued the LLC transfers were legitimate political donations, but prosecutors showed the money went to personal accounts for a personal house purchase. They argued Riley's consulting work was real, but prosecutors showed no one could describe what he actually did, and no work product existed. They argued the gifts were loans or work-related, but ethics experts testified the rules were unambiguous and violations were obvious. They tried to make it about her identity, but the judge shut that down, ruling the evidence spoke to actions, not identity. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they filed back into the courtroom, the tension was palpable. Guilty on 7 of 8 counts for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Hung jury on 1 tax evasion count that prosecutors said they wouldn't retry. guilty on all 4 counts for Riley Roberts. Sentencing came in August 2026. Federal Judge Amit Mehta, an Obama appointee known for being fair and thoughtful, showed no sympathy in his remarks from the bench. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, you built your political career on a foundation of fighting for the working class against wealthy elites. You presented yourself as authentic, as someone who understood struggle, as a champion of ordinary people against powerful interests who exploit them. Your supporters believed you. They gave you their money, their trust, and their hopes. It was all a lie. You used that carefully constructed image to enrich yourself beyond anything your constituents will ever see. You took millions from the billionaires you claimed to oppose. You lived in luxury, while the people you claimed to represent struggled to pay rent. You wore designer clothes worth more than many of your constituents make in a year to exclusive events while tweeting about fighting inequality. You violated your oath of office. You violated House ethics rules. You violated campaign finance laws. You violated tax laws. And perhaps most egregiously, you violated the trust of working people who believed you were one of them. I sentence you to 6 years in federal prison, to be followed by 3 years of supervised release. You will pay restitution of $4.2 million, the amount of the mansion purchase. You will pay additional fines of $500,000, and you will be permanently barred from holding federal office. Mr. Roberts, you enabled and profited from this scheme. I sentence you to 3 years in federal prison. The mansion was seized by the federal government the next day. It was auctioned off 3 months later. Proceeds went to a victims' compensation fund. The House of Representatives didn't wait for the conviction. 3 weeks after the explosive hearing, they voted on expulsion. The final tally was 376 to 41. Only the most progressive members voted against it, and even they looked uncomfortable doing so knowing the evidence. Her district held a special election. A moderate Democrat won easily, running on a campaign of restoring trust and integrity to representation. The political fallout rippled through progressive politics. The squad fractured. Rashida Tlaib issued a statement saying she felt betrayed and deceived. Ayanna Pressley said she had been misled about who AOC really was. Even Bernie Sanders, who had endorsed and campaigned with AOC repeatedly, issued a carefully worded statement. If these allegations are proven true, this represents a fundamental betrayal of progressive values and the working people we fight for. George Soros's network scrambled to create distance. Democracy Alliance issued statements claiming they had no knowledge their funds were being used for personal enrichment. The 3 shell LLCs were quietly dissolved. Several executives resigned without explanation. Progressive media that had lionized AOC for years struggled with how wrong they had been. Some outlets ran introspective pieces asking how they had missed the corruption. Others just moved on to new heroes, quietly deleting old articles praising her authenticity. AOC entered federal prison in October 2026. FCI Coleman in Florida, a medium-security women's facility. Inmate number 67893-018. She is still there with good behavior, eligible for release in 2032 at age 43. Her Twitter account, with 13 million followers, went dormant. Her Instagram, where she had posted videos from her kitchen advocating for the Green New Deal, was deleted. The influencer congresswoman ceased to exist. Riley Roberts served 28 months before being released. He moved back to Boston and got a job in marketing, making $55,000 a year. He refuses all interview requests. The mansion in Wesley Heights was purchased by a tech CEO for $4.5 million. He had no idea about its history until reporters called asking for comment. The lesson echoed through American politics. You can advocate for democratic socialism. You can fight for higher taxes on the wealthy. You can push for policies that help working people, but you cannot personally enrich yourself massively while doing it. You cannot take millions from billionaires while claiming to oppose them. You cannot live in a mansion while representing people who struggle with rent. You cannot wear designer clothes worth more than your constituents' annual income while positioning yourself as one of them. Eventually, someone will check the bank records. Eventually, someone like Dan Bongino will trace the wire transfers. Eventually, the math will stop adding up. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez thought her brand was bulletproof. She thought her victim narrative and identity would shield her from accountability. She thought crying oppression would deflect any investigation. She was catastrophically wrong. The FBI had receipts. Bank statements showed millions from Soros. LLC documents revealed the shell game. Wire transfers that couldn't be explained were found. Tax returns that didn't match the lifestyle were analyzed. Photos of the mansion were displayed. Evidence that couldn't be tweeted away was presented. She had spent 6 years building a brand as the authentic voice of working people. The bartender who became a congresswoman to fight the system. The democratic socialist who would change everything. All of it was a lie. She was a grifter, a champagne socialist. Someone who recognized that progressive politics was trendy and lucrative and used it to get rich while her supporters stayed poor. The $4.2 million mansion proved it. That is what her version of democratic socialism bought. Not for her constituents, but for herself. When the FBI followed the money back to Soros, back to the billionaires she claimed to fight, and back to the dark money networks she had condemned hundreds of times on Twitter, the entire fabricated image collapsed. She went to prison not because she was a woman of color, not because she challenged the establishment, not because of political persecution. She went to prison because she committed crimes, because she took millions in corrupt payments disguised as contributions, because she violated federal laws, because the evidence was overwhelming. The jury convicted her in 3 days. The judge sentenced her without hesitation, and the champagne socialist became inmate 678930088. That is what happens when you use progressive politics as a personal enrichment scheme. The bank records eventually tell the truth, and no amount of Twitter followers or crying victim can change mathematics. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez learned that in federal prison, from magazine covers and Met Galas to an 8/10 cell, from a $4 million mansion to a government-issued jumpsuit, from democratic socialist icon to convicted felon. Because in the end, fraud catches up with you. The receipts don't lie. And she is spending 6 years behind bars because the receipts proved she was the biggest fraud in progressive politics.